This is Spare Time Repair, and this is a collection of CD players I found in local thrift stores. I buy most of my players for this channel on eBay, but if I ever do find them on the shelves, I always purchase them regardless of condition. The thrift store finds tend to have fewer problems than their online counterparts, so I don't think these would merit full videos of their own. Instead, I thought I'd try a slightly different format of looking at multiple players in one video. First, we'll take a look at this Sharp DX650 from 1987. The tray won't open, so I haven't been able to test it beyond that. Next will be this Pioneer PD-101 from 1991. Besides a missing badge, this one won't read a disc, so I'm expecting the usual missing lens problem. After that, I'll tackle this MTC player from 1988. Initially I thought it was in full working order, but later realised that it's supposed to have a backlight for its LCD. And finally, we'll work on this Sony CDP-190 from 1990. This one is in full working order, but needs a bit of a clean-up and perhaps a tune-up as well. So I paid $8 for this one, and it is absolutely filthy. I'll be glad to get the top cover off it. Wow, who stole the PCB? There's a bit of black plastic in here. Suggests that somebody's opened this up before. There's quite a lot of corrosion on these diodes, or is it just dirt? Well, it's come off quite easily. Yeah, players don't get much more basic than that. This has clearly been stored in a shed or something. It's just absolutely filthy. Just going to clean some of the corrosion off this plug before I stick it in the socket. Okay, we're plugged in, but it won't open. So let's remove this clamp. I'm going to try sliding this transport out. I think I need to remove the front panel. 3 screws in the bottom. Okay, so hopefully now I can wind the tray out by turning this gear. And that gives us very easy access to the belt, which is in pretty bad shape. I'm going to try this one. These sled rails are pretty sticky, so it would be nice to remove those and clean them, but access to them is hampered by this board being here. I'll just disconnect these 2 cables. We've got another belt here for the laser sled, and that's a flat belt, which is quite unusual. That one looks okay though. I'm not sure I can slide these out because it's still being held in place by the worm gear on the right here. I think I'm going to have to remove these 2 screws. There we go. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this wouldn't have worked properly without cleaning the rails. Going to put a small bit of lithium grease on here. Not sure who this pickup is made by. Maybe I should unscrew this as well. Still doesn't feel that smooth. It kind of judders a bit. Well, somehow I've lost one of the screws, one of these little screws for this plate here. So this is not going too well. But I have freed this up from the main board. And it looks like I can remove the tray by pushing this in. And this. So this just uses a little ramp here to drop the disc down. The tray's not super dirty, but I'll give it a quick wash. I just don't know where that screw has gone. I can apply a little bit of grease to the worm gear, and actually when it's level this does slide quite nicely. So this bracket's got this tab on it which presses against this limit switch. Oh, there was only 1 screw. I was thinking because there were 2 holes here there were 2 screws, but those just locate over these dimples and there's only 1 screw in the middle. So I'm just going to flip this round and apply some voltage to the motor. Just check whether it's working properly. Well, it's very reluctant to get started. Well, that belt seems to be okay. It seems to be moving freely. Still, it doesn't hurt to lubricate the motors. Leaf switch down here we can clean. Of course this front panel is in desperate need of cleaning as well. It's only 1 screw. This LCD is pretty dusty. And the buttons don't seem too bad. I think I'm going to leave those. The buttons have been welded into the front, so I can't remove them, but they should still scrub up okay. All clean, so let's begin reassembly. These cables feed through the side here. Can't remember where this screw came from. Oh yes I can. It went in the top here, didn't it? Before I go any further, I just want to check I can reinsert the tray with the front panel in place. It's not going in all the way. I can't see what's stopping it. Right, I got it. This white tab here needed to be pushed all the way over, otherwise it was catching on here. And finally, just need to reconnect the clamp. I want to give this power cord a good wipe. Lovely. Well, if ever some outputs needed wire brushing, it's these ones. That's more like it. The whole back panel needs wire brushing really, but that's another story. Well, after the last 1987 player I looked at, someone suggested I use the Joshua Tree as my test disc, and I told them I didn't have it. But then I found it in a thrift store for $2. Kidding me? Well, I just noticed that the puck on the disc clamp is stuck solid, so I think that's our problem. So let's disconnect that again. Yeah, that's not moving at all. See if I can force it up. Here we go. It's like a little thin gasket on the top side that was just stuck in place. Should be okay now. Right, let's try that again. In fact, this is not a good test disc because track 1 has a very slow fade in. Track 2 is not much better. That's interesting. So to skip back and forth, you use the up and down keys, but if you want a fast search, you have to pause it first and then press it, but then you don't have to keep your finger on it. I've never seen that before. It's just searching through on its own. No table of contents permanence, and looks like we've only got whole disk repeat. But anyway, I'm calling that one complete. Let's move on to the next one. Well, this Pioneer is a lot cleaner at least. Gotta say, I'm not a fan of the giant tray or the giant open close button. Otherwise, it's a pretty typical early 90s unit. As you can see, the price was $12 for this, but they were having a 50% day on the day I bought it, so with tax it was less than $7. Looks like there's meant to be 3 screws in the back here, but there's only 1, so I guess someone else has been poking around in here. But will we find a missing lens? Well, we have an unattached grounding wire, so someone has definitely been in here. And I can already see, but I'm going to show you by removing this clamp, that we do indeed have a missing lens. But is it in the machine? Well, if someone's been in here, it's possible that it's fallen out and they didn't notice, which would be a problem. And this looks like one of Pioneer's circular transport systems where the base sort of rotates in order to lift up the pickup. No problem with the eject. Still can't see the lens. Well, it won't let me power it off with the tray out, so I'm just going to have to unplug it, I think. Wow, and the tray just slides straight out. There's no catch on there at all. It's very clean and it's in really good condition. Well, it sounds like there's something underneath the transport, so I'm going to remove that. First disconnecting this flat flex and these 2 connectors. I love my magnetic pickup tool. I've been using it more and more lately. So this will now lift out. And what do we have down here? Bingo! 1 objective lens, ready to refit. Plenty of grease in this player. There's quite a long belt for this one, but looks like it's still doing the job. It's quite a nice mechanism, this one. As it turns, this ring rotates and slowly raises the pickup on these sloped rails at the side. I'm just going to give a quick blow in here because dust could have settled on the inside of the optics. I can't tell if that's seated in there properly, but we'll give it a test, look at the eye pattern and adjust accordingly. This all looks pretty clean already. A tiny amount of new grease on. There's another tiny belt in here for driving the laser sled, but it looks okay, and I don't have one that small anyway. Well, I could remove and clean this front panel, but you wouldn't even notice. It's been well kept. Well, apart from the missing badge, of course. I have a tentative plan for that. But yeah, I'm not going to bother removing this. So let's pop this back in. I've got a spare screw here. I'm going to see if that will fit for doing this grounding wire. No, it's too small. Try this one. Perfect. Just discovered that these are what stops the tray being pulled out, and they catch on the underside of the clamp. So this needs to go on second. I thought it was odd that it just pulled out. Do you know, I misspoke in the introduction. I said this unit was from 1991, but I just noticed on the back it's actually from 1992. So I was going to break out, never mind, but instead we'll go with the Sundays. Nope, it doesn't like that. Obviously that lens isn't in the right place. This tray is really wobbly. I don't like it. It sort of judders as it comes out. Well, I've tried that lens in a couple of orientations now and it's still not reading. And I'm fairly sure that it's seated correctly. Maybe the sled's getting stuck. Also, someone else has been in here. You don't know whether they've messed around with the potentiometers. They could also have messed with the laser power, which is this potentiometer on the flat flex cable. So I'm going to inject some voltage into the sled motor. See if that moves. So I'll plug it back in with the pickup in its outer position. Yeah, maybe that belt isn't okay, because just occasionally the tray gets stuck. Well, it's not the best, is it? Can try this one. Nope. I thought maybe that lens was jumping around because it wasn't glued into place. And so I did glue it with a bit of wood glue on the end of a toothpick. And now it's working. So it seems my fears about all the potentiometers being messed up was unfounded. Maybe that new belt helped as well. There's no table of contents permanence by default, but you can bring it up by pressing the time button a couple of times. But as soon as you eject and reload the disk, it reverts back to this rather unhelpful display. And with it hooked up to the scope, that's not the worst eye pattern I've ever seen. In fact, it's not bad at all. I did try tweaking these, but I couldn't improve it, so I've returned those to their original values. And someone asked what to connect to observe the eye pattern, and it's the RF output of the test point. This is test point 1, and I'm connected to pin 1. Pin 1 is RF, and pin 4 is ground, so that's where my other connection is. Now that operation is restored, what about that missing badge? Well, I got myself some of this epoxy putty, which also withstands temperatures up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So you cut a bit off the end and then knead it into a uniform paste and then push it onto the area you want to repair. In my case, I want to press it onto an existing Pioneer badge to take an impression of it, then let it set, and then I'll have a perfect mould into which hopefully I can melt some plastic. So obviously I'm wearing gloves because this stuff is not what you want to get on your hands. So shouldn't need too much. Assume you remove this outer piece. Alright, let's give that a go. Stuff absolutely stinks. That looks like a uniform colour to me. So I'll get a nice smooth bit. I'm going to leave it for a few minutes to just harden slightly, because if I try and peel it off now, I think it's going to distort. It says it sets in 5 minutes and cures in 1 hour. It's been about 3 minutes and it's definitely firming up. In fact, it might be ready to remove. So I should have applied some sort of release agent. Tell you what, that's not bad, is it? I don't think that could have gone much better. And I think the cassette deck survived as well. But I've been thinking about this and I don't think the melted plastic is really a good idea. I was thinking that 350 degrees Fahrenheit was quite a high temperature resistance, but it's not really. I mean, I still tend to think in Celsius. But then I thought, well, why don't I just coat this in some sort of grease and then use more of the steel stick? Then I thought I could embed some wire, so when it hardens a bit, it'll be easier to lift out. So that's what I'm going to try. So I'm just brushing on some WD-40. I think that will be oily enough. I'll mix up some new putty. Then I'm going to break off very small pieces. And really force it in there. I think maybe my wire loop idea isn't going to work. I'll just give that 5 minutes and see what happens. I'm not sure it's going to release. Well, it's not terrible, but it's not great. Well, you know, I wasn't happy with that first effort, so I tried it again, this time leaving the putty to cure for a few minutes longer before I took it out of the mould, and this one's pretty much perfect. So I've sanded the back, I think it's the right thickness, and just needs painting. Well, I'm rather pleased with that. You know, if you weren't looking for it, I don't think you'd even notice that wasn't original. Okay, hands up who's heard of MTC. I certainly hadn't, and I couldn't find out much about this player, except that it had an identical twin called the Eclipse 101, but I don't know who made it for them. There's no date sticker on this, so I had to look it up. And again, this one was priced at about $12. Well, at first glance I thought it was a Sony mechanism, but I'm not sure that it is. Sony's tended to have these screws in the end as tray stops. Got a couple of Sony chips on the board, and is that the old Samsung logo? Hyundai? That can't be the car manufacturer, can it? I have to say though, that tray is a lot smoother than the Pioneer we just looked at. It's an amusingly large heatsink for this voltage regulator. As I said, this does work, but there should be a backlight for that display. And I don't have many 1988 records, so I'm going to cheat and go with this from 1989. It takes an eternity to read the disc. That's one of the largest LCDs I've seen on a CD player. Those characters are really big. It's quite well featured as well. It's always fun to see the shuffle animation. Again, it took forever to decide what to play. But let's get this front panel off. Just one screw in the bottom. I actually like the look of this. It's a kind of matte charcoal grey colour. There are actually two more screws on the feet. Actually, the tray front might need to come off. Bit of hot glue on there as well. Yes, and these two connectors look like they have the same number of pins, so I'm just going to number them. There's another Sony chip on the front panel, and this screw's got a lot of rust on it. This screw's got a little cardboard washer around it, just to stop it touching this point here. Got the remote sensor under here, and that doesn't want to come out. I think it has been glued. I can't shift that, so I'm going to desolder it instead. Again, a lot of rust in there. There's something rattling inside this display. Annoyingly, the only way to remove it is to desolder it all. The screws are on the underside for this piece. Well, there's our rattling part, the remnants of the backlight bulb. Out it comes. Yet more rust, but now we can undo the screws. And two of the lamps are still in place, but they're wired in series, so If one goes, they all go. Well, I've removed all those original lamps, and a lot of people have told me not to replace incandescent bulbs with LEDs because they'd rather I kept it original, but I don't have any incandescent bulbs like that, so I'm going to use the LEDs anyway. But to do that, I need to know what the supply voltage is, so I'm going to have to hook this little board up to the player again and measure that with the multimeter. Well, in fact, on this side of the board it's labelled +12, -12, so I've got the voltage and the polarity. But it wouldn't hurt to measure it anyway, just to get it more accurate. Right, so here we've got 11.93. And here we've got -12.13. I'm going to use these 5mm green LEDs because I think a green display would be nice. And in diode mode on the multimeter, the forward voltage is 2.17. So with a combined voltage of 24 volts, we deduct the combined forward voltage of those three LEDs, which is left with 17.55 volts. Divide that by 20 milliamps, which is about the operating current for these LEDs, and we get a resistance value of 877.5. Closest I've got to that is a 1K resistor, but that should do the job fine. So I'm going to remove this red positive wire. Have I got this upside down? Was it mounted this way? Let me check my footage. Yes, it was. It was mounted this way, so this resistor needs to go through from the other side. So my LEDs need to go through this side as well. Well, were my calculations correct? Looks good, and the resistor is staying nice and cool, so I think I'm happy with that. There isn't much room for them though. Maybe I should mount them flush to the board. I was thinking that I might need to angle them down, but there's not really room for that anyway. That's just broken off. This yellow plastic is so brittle. Well, I'm hoping this is ABS plastic and my modelling cement will do the job. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to clean up the front panel. And I managed to pry out the remote sensor in the end, which was wedged in there with a mixture of friction and corrosion. Well, it wasn't that dirty before, but it still looks a lot better for it's clean. And I wire brushed all the rust off the remote sensor, so that's a lot better too. So that was just wedged in here. It's quite a tight fit. These buttons have a gentle slope on them, so you need to get them in the right way round. In fact, there's a little post and a slot to ensure that you can't. You're going to have to be very gentle. Just barely tightening it. I better straighten these before I try and put this back. That was quite tricky, but I think I've got them all through. So let's see how that looks. I think that's going to look okay. So this remote sensor needs to feed through here. Well, my new resistor is not fitting because of this post here, so I'm going to vandalise it and remove it. Well, I know it's working, but I still want to have a closer look at this transport. And to remove this screw, I need to remove the power linkage arm. And to remove that, I need to remove the transport, so that's awkward. Ah, that actually swivels out of the way, that's handy. Oh, it's a Sanyo pickup, and by manually lowering the pickup using this cog, you can slide the tray out. Just need to remove these tray stops at the end. It's weird, everything about this to me says Sony. This cover for the belt, this is like a Sony as well. Even the fact that it slides to the side before you lift it off. Well, that belt doesn't look the best. Certainly not. This is a recycled one, but it looks a lot better. Look at all this grease on the sled rail. Let's put this back on first. Well, that grease has got pretty sticky, so I think that might have caused some issues. This one's nowhere near as bad. I can't quite manoeuvre this out of here, so I'm going to have to remove this as well. And this one's got thread lock all over it. There we go. I just wanted access to clean up these holes. There's just a ton of old grease on here. moving very freely. So with the clamp back on, reinsert the tray. So we need to install this screw first, then swing this out of the way to fit the linkage arm and swing it back. And we just need to reconnect these. And finally refit the tray front. Well, this one was a lot more work than I expected, but I think it turned out pretty good. And is it me, or is it reading the table of contents faster than it was before? Well, naturally I had to check that, and comparing the footage, the MTC is now reading the disc over a second faster than it was previously. So I think that proves that even if a player is working, the service can be very beneficial. And you could say we've got hotspots near the top, but honestly it's probably more noticeable on camera than it is in real life. And although it was a bit of a nightmare to service, I think it's quite a nice little player. Anyway, on to the next one. And last but not least is this Sony CDP-190, which I think looks pretty elegant. Paid about $18 for this. I find Goodwill is very inconsistent with its pricing, and as I said, there's actually nothing wrong with this except a bit of cosmetic damage to the tray. Wow, well, if you thought the Shark player was sparsely populated, the Sony says hold my beer. Looks like everything is packed into the front panel. Just a single filter cap on the power supply and a small board for the RCA jacks. Got an access hatch for servicing the transport, and the feet are part of the front panel. Now we've just got two clips on the sides. In fact, it looks like the tray front needs to come off. I'm just going to power it up. That was quite tight. Need to remove this connector and this one. And this grounding screw. And this flat flex should just pull out of here. There we are. That is basically the CD player. You can see something's been spilled on the tray, and this transport is pretty similar to that MTC player, which is what made me think it was a Sony. It's one of those clamps that's just clipped in. This just lifts off. This is a KSS 240A, and there's not much to write home about here. That belt's in better days. Looks like we need to remove these two gears. My replacement is thinner and smaller. And there's more of this white residue down here. I don't know what it is, although it seems to come off fairly easily. And this is so smooth I don't think I need to re-lubricate. That grease still looks good. Clean the lens though, of course. Well, even though this is the main PCB, there's not an awful lot going on. Another remote sensor, another backlit LCD, and I think this might be the DAC, which is a Philips TDA 1543A. That might be the smallest one I've seen in a full-size player. Well, surprisingly, it's a dual DAC, but a low-cost economy version. I'm going to remove these other two boards so I can clean the front panel. It's quite surprising that such a basic model has a headphone jack and volume control. This power switch is just held in with a clip. And again, it's not super dirty, but I might as well do it now. I do like this front panel actually. Looks a lot more impressive on the outside than the inside. You think of all those people who bought this machine, never opened it up, and had no idea that it was 90% fresh air. Well, I think that just sits on there. By the way, I couldn't completely remove these marks from the tray, but I don't think you'd really notice them anymore. And finally, the tray front. And I did say at the start that I might give it a tune-up, but that was when I thought it had a normal-sized PCB. Potentiometers for this one are tiny. You'd need a minuscule screwdriver to get in there. Also from experience, the test points aren't properly labelled, and you're not quite sure which one you're on. You'd have to solder wires to it and hook it up to the oscilloscope. And to be honest, I don't think it's worth it. It sounds okay, it seems to be tracking okay, so I'm going to leave it alone. Well, I cheated for 1988. So let's have never mind after all. No table of contents permanence, but we can get it back briefly. Pretty quick at searching, can almost keep up with me. Let's have a look at the shuffle animation. And you can see this unit does have a fader, so if I hit that, it just fades it out and then puts it into pause. Then you could fade it back in again. Surprising it has that really for what's clearly a very budget model. I've tested all these players for a few hours now and they've all performed faultlessly. I think the Sony is the best looking of the four, but the one I've had the most fun using is the MTC. Its buttons feel premium with a very subtle click, and it made me realise how big a part buttons have to play in the user experience. The Pioneer is the biggest disappointment. That display does nothing for me and the tray feels cheap and flimsy. Perhaps I should have left that badge off to preserve their dignity. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.